Hello everyone. Welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at the super full blue moon in Pisces, August 30th and 31st, depending on where in the world you are, 2023. We're going to take a look at the moon above and then get some additional insight with the tarot below to see how we can best leverage this energy for our best and highest good. Welcome. This is Be the Whole You, and my name is Gulveg, and I am really excited to be talking about this super full blue moon in Pisces. And just as the very name of this moon is kind of a mouthful, there's a lot to this lunar alignment. So let's just get right into it. So this super full blue moon is at 7 degrees in Pisces, and it's in opposition to the sun, which is at 7 degrees in Virgo. And the main thing about this right off the bat is that this particular full moon is in conjunction with Saturn. So Saturn is at 3 degrees in Pisces as well. And this is a very interesting alignment because Pisces is very imaginative, very ethereal, not the most structured kind of energy. And Saturn is the absolute opposite. Saturn is structure. It's time, it's organization, it's systems, it's tradition. And so we also have Mercury in retrograde at 19 degrees in Virgo. Remember, the sun is in Virgo as well. And even though the sun and Mercury are not conjunct, I do think that Mercury in retrograde in Virgo and with this particular full moon does have an influence. And so the reason why I'm bringing all of this up is because Virgo is about distilling, analyzing. It's good at taking apart a system or an idea, a theory, and analyzing all the parts. Virgo is very good at being methodical and creating systems and structure. So Virgo and Saturn, they get along. They're happy working together. Mercury is the planet of Virgo, and Mercury is the planet of communication. It also is the planet of understanding and of knowledge, and that is one of Virgo's happy places, is being able to assimilate data, information, and knowledge, and perhaps even put it to practical use. So then you have this energy that's very analytical, very organized, very system-oriented, and then it is in this oppositional dance with Pisces, which is about imagining the possibilities. It's not structure, it's inspiration, it's imagination, it's spiritual connection. So there's a very deep spiritual component to this full moon. So when I take a look at this, and I remember some of the lunar alignments that we've had over these past few months, there definitely has been like taking 3 steps forward and 2 steps back in the last few months, where we have maybe more of a sense than we did 6 months ago, or especially a year ago, on the essence of what it is that we want to create or what it is that we want to move into next in our life. May not know all of the specifics of the how and what that's going to look like, but things are starting to kind of come together for a lot of folks. This ethereal vision that was almost like an oasis out in the distance is now, we're getting closer, and it's starting to take just a little bit more shape. And so what is happening with this particular full moon is that now, as we're getting closer, we may have found that we might again need to take a few steps back. That this going forward and coming back thing, even though it can be really frustrating, because most of us want to just set that intention and then full steam ahead and we get to our destination. That's what most of us want. And there's also this, I think, somewhat unrealistic thought, especially in spiritual communities, of being in the flow. And there's sometimes a presumption that if things aren't unfolding effortlessly, and if things aren't easy, that somehow we must be doing something wrong. And I'm here to tell you folks that is not the case. if things are feeling a little like, if you're feeling like it's been this few steps forward, 2 steps back, or if things are feeling less than easy, it doesn't necessarily mean that you did anything wrong. It doesn't mean that you're not in the flow. It just means that the flow happens to be perhaps river rafting down the Colorado over big boulders versus meandering slowly in a canoe down a trickling sweet brook in a mountain valley. Like, the flow is different depending on the resistance to whatever your aspiration is. I read a book some time ago called The 4 Desires, and it broke down manifesting in a formula where it said your desire and the resources to meet that desire must be greater than the resistance to that desire. And I feel like that is a very common sense and a very Virgo kind of way of understanding manifestation. So if things aren't easy, it doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It just means that we might have to go back to the drawing board and try again. There's a lot of things that we experience every single day that wouldn't be here if the people who invented them decided that it was too hard and therefore they must be on the wrong track. This cell phone that I'm using right now, I'm sure that there's a lot of components to this technology that I'm using right now that if folks had decided that it just must not be meant to be, we wouldn't be seeing this video right now. So don't get discouraged just because things might be a little bit more difficult than what you might like. It doesn't mean that you're on the wrong track, and it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. So with that being said, with this Piscean energy with this, we will most likely be the parts that are feeling sticky about what it is that we're wanting to accomplish, the things that seem unclear still, or perhaps we made a plan to go a particular direction and now we are getting like some signs and some signals that maybe we need to take a few steps back and go a different direction. Like perhaps you've created a business plan and now you have to like scrap part of it and redo it. Or perhaps you made a plan to move or to change careers, and that is just that's going to look a little bit different than what you initially thought. This Piscean energy will give us fresh insight that is directly from spirit, directly from source, because the Pisces energy is really, really strong as far as its connection with spirit. That these inspirations, at least some of them, will be inspirations that we need to write down. Pay attention to your dreams over the next week or so. I look at the full moon as being like a 3-day event, but some full moons have a much more long-lasting influence, and I think that this is one of them. This is a really powerful full moon. So any kind of dreams that you have that seem really potent, that seem really vivid, write them down, even if you don't know what they mean yet. Any kind of aha or spontaneous insight that you feel that you might have, even if you're not sure if it's useful, write it down. It might end up paying off in the long run, and it may just be some of those missing pieces that'll just help kind of click things into place. Some of the other things that I wanted to bring up too was there is a semi-square with this full moon between Chiron at 19 degrees and the midheaven that's at 20 degrees. So the success of this is somewhat dependent on us prioritizing our own needs, wants, goals, and desires. And there has been this this theme over the last year, and it's going to continue through the rest of the year, where collectively we're being asked to assess what the boundary is between the needs of the individual and the desires of the individual versus the needs and the desire of the group. So the group can be culture, it can be society, it could be your blood relatives, it could be your school, your place of work. The group can show up in a lot of different ways, but individually and are all in our own ways, our astrology is bringing situations up where we are being asked to define for ourselves, where do our rights end and begin, and where does the group's rights end and begin. And this is going to be a really important piece as we start to decide for ourselves what support really is. So if we are constantly sacrificing ourselves for the needs and wants and desires of others, then that is unhealthy, and we will end up an empty cup, burnt out, exhausted, and quite frankly nothing left to be able to create the things that we want to create for ourselves. So there is also, with all of this, we have the rising in Leo at 8 degrees, and that's it's a quincux with this full moon, and that Leo rising is giving us a little bit of confidence, a little bit of a oomph, a little bit of a boosty, if you will, of courage and self-esteem to be able to take a look at where we perceive limitations and where perhaps we create our own kind of rules of conduct that may be self-sabotaging. So creativity is always it's always a process of limitation, but it's intentional limitation. When we create something, we're creating that thing to the exclusion of other options. So there's always a limiting factor to creating something. But if those limitations start to become too rigid, then those limitations can end up snuffing out and exhausting the very thing that we want to create. It can sabotage our creative potential. So one of the big things about this duality in this way that we are trying to navigate and decide for ourselves individually what our needs are and how to prioritize those in balance with the needs and desires and wants of those that we care for and those that we're in community with, is to take a look and using that Virgo energy to analyze what is really support. What is support for you? A lot of times I think we might misunderstand support as something that's familiar and comfortable. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's supportive. It may have been supportive at one time. And this also goes into this whole dichotomy of what is, what my rights are and what the rights of the of others are, and how to make that dance and how to make those those boundaries. But things like codependency, the disease to please, the fear of rejection, imposter syndrome, all of these things and placating to those impulses are all things that feel familiar, and in exchange we may feel like we're being supported because, for example, when we compulsively need to please others, even at our own expense, we may get positive feedback for that, and that feels good. But in the long run, it's not actually supportive. So these are concepts that might be coming up a lot for us as we take a look at how we're structuring our lives with this Saturn energy in conjunction with the full moon. It's gonna cause us to take a look and see how are we structuring our lives, and how can we build a foundation that will not only help us take that next step to where we want to go, but build a foundation that can be gracefully maintained as gracefully as possible. Because I don't want to say easy, because it's not necessarily easy to maintain a foundation, but it is sustainable. Something that won't burn us out, something where it will be supportive, and that we will be surrounded and have resource with systems and people and organizations and groups and families that truly do support our health, our vitality, our joy, and in exchange we support them as well. So really taking a look at reciprocation and what that looks like for you, and also taking a look at what support looks like and where certain folks and certain organizations, how they might be supportive and how we might be supportive to them. We don't just because a person or organization isn't supportive with everything doesn't mean that they're not a support either. One person may be really great at emotional support but not be able to provide any other kind of support beyond that, and that's fine. So this is a really big theme for this particular full moon, and the more clear we can get on this, I think the more graceful the moving forward will be. And there's going to be pieces of, I feel like before this full moon, especially this month, I think that there's a lot of folks who have started something and then they ended up starting to try something and it's just not working out. And if that's you, then just cut the fat off, cut what it is that doesn't need to be there. Distill. So when you distill alcohol, for example, you use heat to burn off the impurities. That's kind of what's happening with this Virgo energy, is that the Pisces energy and Saturn is working together to bring up to the awareness of where the cracks in the foundation that we've built might be, so that we have the opportunity to back up a few steps, repair those cracks, perhaps maybe even expand the foundation so that when we do move ahead, it's going to be sustainable, it's going to be clear, and we're just going to feel a lot more confident about it. So it's not necessarily an easy energy, this full moon, but in the long run, it's definitely beneficial. Yeah, so I think that's for the most part most of the notes that I wrote down. So let's take a look and see what the tarot have to say. What additional insight can we get on this? So please join me in setting the intention that whatever part of the tarot reading is most pertinent for you, and whatever situations you might be facing and decisions you might be needing to make, that you will just know that that part of the message is uniquely for you. Okay, how might we best leverage this Piscean full blue moon, super full blue moon, August 30th and 31st in Pisces? Okay. Okay, so yeah, the cards are actually very similar to what was just said. And for a moment, I just want to back up and just explain what the super full moon is. It just means that the moon is closer to the earth and than it usually is, so it really intensifies the effect. And blue moon means that it's the second full moon within the same month, which is something that is very rare, and that's why they have the saying of once in a blue moon. So that in and of itself is almost kind of we're having this do-over from the last month on. The full moon is really good at being able to let things go and bring things to completion. And so this being that this is a second full moon in the same month, we're really given an extra opportunity for this to kind of clear the slate. And that is definitely what these cards are having to say. So the very first card that comes up is Four of Pentacles. And Four of Pentacles, it's glaring, is a lot about creating foundation, practical foundation, because Pentacles are all about, it's about wealth, it's about home, it's about resources, security, family to a certain extent, safety. So it's it's the earth element, it's practical, it's three-dimensional, it's the here and now. And so the card that comes right after it is the Seven of Pentacles reversed. So I see this as And the Seven of Pentacles is about reaping what you sow. So something about the foundation that we have created, and there wasn't anything wrong with the plans, but there's part of the plans that are not coming to harvest, and we're kind of getting some realizations that are in a certain way that it's kind of like a tough truth that we're having to just face, that, you know, this particular plan, this particular piece, it's either not happening or it's not going to be happening within the time that we thought it was going to. And so now we're backing up, and it's time to reassess. And so then we have the Hierophant that comes up, and the Hierophant is very much associated with the energy of Saturn. The Hierophant is about systems, it's about tradition, it's about organization. Those are all themes of Saturn. And here we also have like a mentor type of person that is giving the key of knowledge to his followers. So there may be an individual that might be out there to help, either a teacher, a mentor, it could be an actual organization, school, something of that nature, that might be helpful in getting whatever it is that you need to get in order to recreate this foundation and create a structure and harvest all the things that you want to harvest. Because the thing that I'm seeing about the Seven of Pentacles, it's very interesting because, you know, the Tower card, for example, is a card where foundation completely crumbles. The Tower card didn't come up on this one. So, and what I'm seeing here is that it's not like we're having to scrap everything. It's not a complete foundation crumbling. It's not a tower that's burning to ashes. It's like we're just having to reassess certain aspects of what it is that we had planned, or certain aspects of what it is that we have going on, and readdressing those pieces to make everything work together harmoniously within our life. So it's more about adjusting versus like a complete overhaul. So the work that you've done thus far, and even if like you might be feeling frustrated that it feels kind of like you're like starting and stopping, that, you know, the one of the next cards that comes up, by the way, is the Prince of Pentacles. This is slow and steady wins the race. It's step by step. Prince of Pentacles is not, he's the Knight of Pentacles in other versions of the tarot. And he is not the most dynamic knight, not the most dynamic prince. He's not romantic like the cups, and he's not as dynamic as the wands or even the swords. But when he plants a seed, it's long-term and it's sustainable, and he still gets things done. So that's what this energy is that it's may not be as fast, as furious, or as dynamic as maybe some of us might want, but it's slow and steady wins the race. And the Prince of Pentacles came up with the Two of Swords. And this is about being at a crossroads. So, and the card that came up after that is the Two of Wands reversed. And the Two of Wands is about planning for a journey. So when it's reversed, it means that we need to reassess some of the plans and take a look at some of the pieces. Maybe there might be some baggage that this Two of Wands guy for his journey might need to let go of in order to move forward more freely. Sometimes, I mean, have you ever like packed for a trip, and then you get home after your trip and you realize you only like use like half of whatever it is that you put in your suitcase? I think that that's kind of the energy of this, is like we're trying to maybe micromanage, over control pieces of our situations that maybe we don't have as much control over as we'd like. And so Saturn, in being associated with time and systems and chronology, is like, you know, let go of the things that you can't really control so that you can really divest your energy into areas where you may have actually more influence. And that brings us to the Two of Swords. Is the theme of this full moon is We're playing the long game here. This is not about quick fixes or instant gratification at all. This is about taking a good, honest look at what it is that either needs to be healed, let go of, reassessed, refurbished, renewed, repurposed, reframed in our life in order to be able to create a more solid foundation for the future. And we're in this Virgo energy that's in association with the Pisces full moon is going to be one that we will be taking a look at and making some tough decisions. But we are being supported with the rising in Leo. We're being supported by the Pisces spiritual inspiration. There's no better time to connect with your guides than now. Like, this is a great time for spiritual connection, and the healing and the journey that we take as a result of this will probably up-level us spiritually as well. So yeah, like I said, it's not necessarily easy, but it's worthwhile. So one thing I wrote down that seemed that was important was making sure that we aren't feeding into presumptions or irritability. There is an aspect of this that can leave us feeling irritable, that we might want to indulge in unhelpful coping mechanisms such as overeating, alcoholism, drugs, things of that nature. Be careful of those kind of impulses and try to make decisions that are more supportive and more healthier, that will really support you. And if there are any big decisions that you need to make, you don't have to make them right away, typically. If you can delay them, Mercury comes out of retrograde September 15th. So, and at the very least, if you can just hold off on any big decisions until at least the 8th or the 9th, you'll probably benefit from that if that's possible. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you all back here in a couple weeks. We're going to take a look at the next new moon. Bye-bye.